Let me start by asking a question. How many people in this room, when they think about harm reduction, the first product that comes to mind is e-cigarettes? Well, if you have not been convinced by the previous two presentations, I'm hoping that my presentation would convince you that there is some tremendous harm reduction opportunities from nicotine pouches. Why is that important? Well, look, smoking has been declining all over the world, except, of course, for China. But despite this decline, there are still 1 billion people who still continue to smoke. And this is despite the knowledge of the harmful consequences of smoking. Now, of course, what can we do to accelerate this decline? We should continue to implement the traditional strategies of preventing initiation and promoting cessation. But we know that in itself is not working fast enough. So that can be complemented by encouraging people who are unable or are unwilling to quit to switch to less harmful smoke-free products. And this harm reduction framework is actually very well accepted in many disciplines. So let me ask you a question. Can you name one harm-reducing activity that we all engaged in today before we came to the conference? Maybe not today, but anybody? Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And the seat belts were actually invented in Sweden, since we were talking about the Swedish experience. But that's a perfect example of how we have engaged in harm reduction in other disciplines of our lives. But when it comes to tobacco, this is still yet to be embraced by society. But we know that this is the foundational principle that relies on things other than abstinence. So how do we minimize the risk by presenting reduced harm alternatives? And we at Altria believe that this can be done by offering a variety of options. The previous speakers talked about the options, but these options should include both oral as well as inhalable products. And today I'm going to speak about the harm reduction opportunity of oral nicotine pouches, focusing on nicotine pouches. So what are they? They come in a range of flavors and a range of nicotine levels. Now, these products have no tobacco leaf. It's similar to the products that you heard from the previous speakers. And there are many reasons why these offer a harm reduction opportunity, but I'm going to highlight 3 considerations for you to just think about. First, because they are not combusted, they have no tobacco in them, so naturally the risk profile of these products is much lower. And for example, pulmonary exposure is non-existent, so the likelihood of any pulmonary disease is non-existent. Moreover, there is no side stream smoke, so there is little harm to the people around the folks who use these products. Second, I think some of the previous speakers talked about the simplicity of the form. They're very simple. There is no heating, there is no charging, there's no cleaning needed. They're simple to use. And third, and probably the most important thing, is that there is no evidence of any unintended consequences, specifically among non-users and youth. So let's dig deeper into how did we consider the scientific evidence. So we rely on a framework that is based on 3 pillars: constituent reduction, individual risk reduction, and population harm reduction. And these 3 pillars were based on the regulatory requirements in the US, but also utilize some core foundational scientific principles that are published in literature. And there are a number of studies that are done to support the 3 lines of evidence. And I'm going to go through some of the key sources of evidence for us to demonstrate to FDA that these products are appropriate for the protection of public health. Okay, so when it comes to constituent reduction, no surprise, because these products have no tobacco leaf and because they're not combusted, many of the toxicants are either absent, they cannot be detected, or even the ones that can be detected are substantially reduced compared to cigarette smoke. So this is an obvious statement, and it kind of verified by other products in this category as well. Now, even though we can demonstrate through the chemical characterization that there is nothing present, what happens in humans? So we did a randomized controlled clinical trial amongst people who smoke, and when we switched them to these products, the levels of many of the toxicants that FDA has identified that are associated with many of the smoking-related diseases are either substantially reduced compared to cigarette smoking, but also these levels are comparable to abstinence. So once again, the constituent levels in the products are low, exposure is low. So if a smoker switches to these products and sustains these large reductions in exposure for a long period, the natural logical conclusion is that there's going to be a risk reduction. And the conclusion about risk reduction is primarily based on the epidemiological evidence that exists for smokeless tobacco products, including some of the stuff that Brian showed with the Swedish data. So the epidemiology is there. If you are going to switch from cigarettes to nicotine pouches, the risk for many of the smoking-related diseases are going to be substantially lower. So now, once we have established the risk profile, let's see what happens when people are given these products and what's the profile look like. Look, one of the key elements of the switchability of a product is that it has to deliver a satisfying level of nicotine. And if you look at this chart, the range of nicotine levels that we observe is comparable to the nicotine content of these products. And although there was a question from the audience about, well, what about the Tmax? I think nicotine pharmacokinetics is one of the elements that gives you a satisfying experience, but there are other dimensions. It's very multifactorial. But the important consideration is that, even though a smoker gets a high level of nicotine, that is a sharp spike, but not all smokers are the same. Different smokers will exhibit different levels of nicotine, and the availability of the different nicotine levels in the products gives something to the smoker to choose from. And because of the nicotine levels, the switching behavior kind of manifests because people who were smokers in this study, over a period of 6 weeks, when we offered them the range of nicotine products to choose from the portfolio, 28% switched completely in 6 weeks, and 72% of those who were using the traditional smokeless tobacco products switched completely within 6 weeks. Now, mind you, these results are even more striking because none of these individuals were interested in quitting. That is an important fact to remember. Now, of course, this is an experimental setting, and they did get the products to choose from as an optionality, but nonetheless, if they would not have found this product satisfying enough, why would they have switched? They had no reason to lie their product use behavior. And the other thing to point out is that many of them reduced their cigarette consumption or their dip consumption by 50% or more. And another striking result is flavors. Flavors is a hot topic for all alternative products, but particularly for oral products. I think one of the things that we have to remember, at least for the on-nicotine pouches, they contain the pharmaceutical-grade nicotine, and the flavors that are used are traditionally used in food and other oral products that are consumed routinely. But what we see here is that 80% of those who switched said that they used the flavors, and the other varieties contributed to a little bit, but the vast majority of the people who switched were using the flavored varieties, at least 2 or more. And another important finding from this study that we found was that at the end of the 6 weeks, when we asked them about what would be the reasons they would continue using these products, it broadly kind of falls into 3 categories. One is harm reduction. They said that it helps them prevent smoking or relapse back to smoking. The second category was flavors. The availability of flavor options was really an important consideration in the decision to continue to use these products. And the third piece was nicotine levels. So overall, this clearly shows that these products have a promise of getting smokers to consider in the portfolio of alternative products as they're thinking about their switching decisions. And then, of course, all this is nice, but what about the likely unintended consequences? So we did a study in close to 5,000 users and non-users, and what we found is that non-users have very little interest in using these products, which is a good thing, but more importantly, the likelihood of use among youth is very, very low. This is data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, similar to what Brian showed, that the youth use of pouch products is less than 1%, and this is consistent through 2021 and 22. Now, mind you, keep this in mind that these products have been on the market since 2016, and they have been available in these flavors. Yet, youth use is really low. So this does not seem to be an issue. And we hope that this number will remain low, because I think that as long as we continue to market them responsibly, I think that's unlikely to go up. So net, what we demonstrated that there are converging lines of evidence to indicate that these products are appropriate for the protection of public health. Now, we have submitted a PMTA, a new product application to FDA in 2020, and it's been 3 years. 3 years, and FDA has yet to make a decision on the appropriateness of continuing to market this product, despite the profile looking so favorable. But anyway, what else is preventing us from achieving the harm reduction potential of these products? Can somebody tell me that? Misperceptions. This is data from the POD study, and it is so striking that this is data for e-vapor, smokeless, and snus. And the numbers continue to deteriorate, but more than 90% of people who smoke believe that smokeless products are equally or more harmful than cigarettes. I mean, just look at the fact that quarter of them believe that smokeless products, oral products, are even more harmful than cigarettes. That's just mind-blowing. That just shows that how deeply rooted these misperceptions are, and the similar things that you see for both e-vapor and snus. So in addition to the product misperceptions, there's also a widely spread nicotine misperception. And this is a publication from FDA scientists that showed that 3/4, 75% of adult smokers believe that nicotine causes cancer. And that dissuades them from switching. So you saw product misperceptions and nicotine misperceptions. So layer that all on top of each other. That's what is stopping them from switching. Now, another dimension to these misperceptions is the widely held misperceptions amongst physicians. This was research done by Steinberg et al. From Rutgers, and many have seen this in the past. 80% of doctors believe that nicotine directly causes cancer, COPD, or CVD. These are healthcare providers who are providing advice to their patients about the benefit of switching. And when they have these misperceptions, it's no surprise that they're going to likely suggest not to switch to these products. So what can we do about it? So there has to be some solution to it. Well, if you we did a survey and we talked to people who smoke, and they said that they actually are looking to public health and authoritative bodies for credible information about the different tobacco products. And the vast majority, 80%, believe that authoritative bodies like CDC, FDA, or healthcare providers and healthcare organizations like AMA, the American Medical Association or the Lung Association, as the most trusted source for information about tobacco products. And they also say that these individuals have the responsibility to communicate the accurate information about these products. So that is what needs to happen. And I'm going to just show you some data that, when you correct these misperceptions, it actually is important, because this is, once again, data from the past study that many of you may be familiar with, that those who have accurate perceptions about the risk of these products are 2 to 3 times more likely to switch than those who have the misperceptions. So if you can correct these misperceptions, there's a greater likelihood of switching. As a matter of fact, as a sidebar, I'll tell you that we actually did an analysis of the PATH data set, and we did some modeling, and we were able to show that if people have the accurate perceptions about the nicotine not being the main reason for the smoking-related diseases, about 800,000 premature deaths could be prevented over 80 years. So our modeling exercise indicated that this can have a long-term benefit to public health. So let me end by just leaving you with these 3 thoughts. In order to be successful in harm reduction, we need to have a marketplace of FDA-authorized products for people to choose from. The second thing is that we need to continue to make sure that accurate, non-misleading information is made available to people who smoke so that they can make an informed decision. And the third piece, which is really important, is that there should be a consistent, unified public health message about the benefits of switching. And as smokers kind of digest this information, that percolates to them, they know that they're engaging in a product that has harmful consequences. And if we have a range of products, if they are equipped with the right information, if they're educated enough, they will make the choices that is right for them, because that's an important thing to remember. Smokers are often marginalized and forgotten, but they are looking for information and products, and once they have that and equipped with all that, they will make the choices that is right for them. And I'll end and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I thought that was absolutely excellent, and I'm going to have possession of the microphone and abuse it by asking a question first. Could you talk to us about addiction briefly? And I ask that as a personal question, really, because I now use these products, and I think I use them much more than I used a vape product or some of the other products.
Wow. So that's a pretty broad general question. You know, there's no doubt that nicotine is addictive, right? And if you think about the products that I showed you the nicotine levels. You know, nicotine pharmacokinetics is one dimension of addiction. And you know, I'm reminded of a quote from Clearing the Smoke. This is the book that was published by the Institute of Medicine many years ago. And their take on abuse liability was that an alternative product, a smoke-free product, should have enough of an abuse liability so that people will switch. It should have enough of a reinforcing effect so that people will switch. But it can't be higher than that of a cigarette. So in that regards, and I think we have to keep in mind that, you know, in order for people to switch, and especially if you look at the product like these, which have such a favorable risk profile, you know, addiction should be considered in the context of the harm from the product. So, you know, if the product delivers enough nicotine that is satisfying enough, and if they switch, that's a good thing. That's just my point of view.
Thank you. Over there, Ian there.
I'll try and make this quick, Mohammed. First a question, then I'll explain why I'm asking. First question, is there a standard for nicotine pouches at the moment, similar to the Gautier standard? The reason I'm asking, and this also relates to the other presentations, several of you have extrapolated the Swedish experience, snus, to nicotine pouches. One of the advantages of snus is that they had the Gautier standard or the old ESTOC standard, which gives the regulators some confidence that these products were manufactured to a certain level of quality. What considering nicotine pouches, someone coming along and manufacturing a nicotine pouch, let's say using unrefined extracted nicotine, which has HPHCs and others in there, and really upsetting the cart. So is there value? So if there isn't a standard, is there a value in developing a standard for nicotine pouches similar to Gautier?
No, that's a good question. Look, you know, as relates to product standards, broadly speaking, I think it's an important point for consideration, particularly for products like e-cigarettes, where, you know, you have such a lot of differences between products, and having some baseline standards will kind of eliminate some of the bad actors in the marketplace. For the nicotine pouches, I'm not sure whether having a product standard makes sense, because we saw from the HPAC profile from not only from the ON but from the Zen data that there's, what would you establish the standard for? There's nothing in there.
Well, my only concern, that's with pharmaceutical nicotine, but what if I was to use, let's say, a raw, unrefined nicotine extract and still call it a nicotine pouch? Then you would have HPACs and be a very different profile.
Fair enough, but you know, I think most of the responsible manufacturers will not use unrefined nicotine, so yeah.
Yes, hello, Rasmus. I think you showed a little bit about the recruitment of consumers to this product. And where does your consumers come from to this category? I think you assume that it has no recruitment of, let's say, new to the nicotine category in what you presented. So is it only coming from combustibles and vape products?
Well, so, you know, we have done some market scan analysis of who the consumers are, and they are predominantly smokers, about 60% of smokers, and 40% are from people who use smokeless tobacco products.
I actually would like to support the question, the answer on the standards. There are standards. So Swedish Institute of Standards for nicotine pouches, British Institute of Standards also for nicotine pouches, and I think recently Pakistani Institute of Standards, they also for nicotine pouches. And they do, these are voluntary standards, like GOTE standards, voluntary industry standards, and they do mention that all ingredients should be food grade, and the nicotine should be the pharmaceutical grade, and then some additional, the pH levels, nicotine levels, and whatnot. So.
Yeah, I was responding to whether there are any standards that we have set up. But, you know, an interesting dimension to the standards is, of course, in some countries, there is some talk about limiting the nicotine levels in the pouches. And I don't know whether that makes sense, because at least when I think about nicotine pouches and the ability to make them appealing enough for smokers to switch, there is no right threshold of what's the maximum nicotine level. Of course, you know, I mean, we don't expect manufacturers to put 100 milligrams of nicotine. That is just going to lead to all kinds of bad effects. But, you know, you need to keep in mind, so the construct that is in the US about assessing the abuse liability relative to cigarette is perhaps the right way to think about it.